Shalom. This week we start Parashah Ki Tavo. It means when you come in. Now, just a quick one before I get into it. I just want to give some insights on studying the scriptures. Now, an idea or a verse or a word doesn't mean anything by itself. For example, the plain and simple logic is, if I have one word, for example, go, and you just think about go, what does go mean? And I say go there, it gives you a bit more information. Oh, so I need to go somewhere. And if you add more information to that word go there beyond the river, that gives you more information. So in the same way, within the Torah, a verse, an idea, or even the name of a parashah doesn't mean anything unless you connect it to something else. So in this parashah, the word when you come in, Ki Tavo, is in relation to coming into the promised land. Now, we can also connect it to another idea from the previous parashah, which is the name of the previous one, Ki Tizeh. That means when you go out. When you go out what? When you go out to war. So now we see two ideas. Both have to do with movement. Both have to do with moving from one place to another place. The one is moving from the wilderness, and it's moving into the Jordan. And the other one is moving from the Jordan, moving into the promised land. So when you compare Ki Tizeh with Ki Tavo, it is like the two river banks, one on this side of the Jordan, the other one on the other side of the Jordan. And that is the border line that is going to be crossed over. Now, the crossing over idea is linked to the Hebrew term or Hebrew word Ivri. That means to cross over. And that also is the meaning of the word Hebrew, of which Abraham was the first Hebrew. And Hebrew or Abraham is in relation to becoming Hebrew. You need to partake with the covenant. It's the covenant that makes you Hebrew. So what's the covenant all about? Just about believing a truth, believing a few facts? No, it's about what Abraham did symbolically. He left his household. We leave Egypt. And then he faced the mountain. The mountain was, he had to go up and sacrifice Isaac, offer up Isaac, which is symbolic of the sacrificial system of the covenant system, or the covenant. So the sacrifices are part of the covenant. Then it has to do with the mountain. You have to obey the instructions in order to partake in the sacrifices. Now, in this parashah, we also see a mountain. We actually see two mountains. We also see obedience. We also see the need to go somewhere and then follow the instructions. And there's also sacrifices on this mountain, specifically Mount Ebal. Now, what this tells us is that the covenant idea is encapsulated and symbolized by the mountain, specifically Mount Sinai or Mount Thorn, and its counter, or not the counter, the other side of, or the other image of Mount Sinai is Mount Herob or Mount Cherev, where we get the sword, which is in last week's Torah portion word Ki Tizeh. So this is the Aleph Taf, or the Taf Aleph with a Zayin in the middle. So it's like the Aleph Taf is holding the sword, and the Aleph Taf is commander and judge Yeshua HaMashiach. Now, when we compare that with this parashah, Ki Tavo, we see exactly the same letters. We get Kaf Yod, which is a double hand. The first Kaf is a normal Kaf. That means the hand of man. And then the Yad, or Yod, is the spiritual hand, or the hand of God, or the hand of His Holy Spirit. So that is His hand working together with our hand. So what are these hands going to do? Now, in this parashah, we read about they work the land, and they're now bringing the first offerings, the first fruits. They need to bring to Yahweh my Elohim. I bring my offerings to Yahweh my Elohim in honor of him, because of the covenant and the promises of the covenant giving me possession of this land. And now I say thank you. That's the basic idea of this Torah portion. In the previous Torah portion, the double hand was the hand of man, the hand of the Spirit, in relation to the Aleph Tav with the sword. We don't have the sword. The sword is the word. We have the word in our mouths. And what we saw in Daniel 10 was the spiritual battle that's been fought by the commander, Aleph Tav, with his cheref, his sword, the Zion, in his hand, in his mouth, overcoming the enemy in the heavenlies. And we speak into the physical the words that Yahweh is revealing to us, just like he did with his servant Daniel. So that's a massive revelation regarding spiritual warfare in a time like this. So whenever we go through tribulation or trials or things, and you think you've got it tough, just imagine the spiritual warfare that's happening in the heavenlies. So that set aside, that laid a foundation for that side of the Jordan. Now on this side of the Jordan, the Zion has been now replaced by the letter Bet and the letter Vav. So what does that mean? I now present a Bet Vav to the Aleph Tav, because the Bet Vav is within the Aleph Tav. And it's like you are in Mashiach. Who is in Mashiach? The Bet Vav. What does Bet mean? The house, the household. Who's the Vav? It's you. Yahweh, your Elohim. It's personal, but it's also collective. And both are in the hand of Mashiach. And he's now taking them as first fruits of the work of Mashiach. And that's a symbolism of Bet Vav. And on top of that, Bet Vav adds up to the number 8. Number 8 is also letter Chet, that means life. That's a doorway of blood, the Passover doorway that enters in. And that is through Mashiach. So we have the number 8 within the Aleph Tav. And we also have the concept of number 8, which is new beginnings. There's a new cycle starting in the 8th millennium. So that's also to do with number 8. And the 8th millennium, who will rule? The Aleph Tav. Because number 8 is within the Aleph Tav. Very, very significant symbolism that we see in the name of this parasha. Not only that, within the number 8, if you look at the Gematria, I'm not going to give the detail here, we'll wait till this Saturday coming, then I'll reveal the detail. But just as a summary, the meanings within the Gematria of number 8 is to do with the whole process of what I call the cycle of life. Now the cycle of life has to do with a beloved and his bride, who now give consent, and they engage and become echad. As a result of that, she becomes pregnant. At the end of the pregnancy, she becomes nervous because it's a birth. I know the ladies will identify with this. And then after that, we see the relief and the moving slowly and moving the baby towards the breast and the nipple of the mother, nurturing her new baby and giving the baby her love. And all those meanings I just mentioned are in the Gematria of number 8. So what do we see within the letter Bet? We see the new babies coming in, and the Vav represent the mother, who's part of this process of giving birth. Now, what we saw from the Great Tribulation, it's got two meanings. The one is connected with the Zion, the sword. That's the big war. The war that will happen at the end of the 6th millennium on the border as you cross into the 7th. The other meaning is the Bet Vav, that has to do with the great birth, the big birth. Let's rather say the great birth. So the great war and the great birth are one and the same thing. And it's also relating to the great harvest. And that's why the theme of this parasha is also about bringing your fruit. The fruit are the new babies who are were born during the time of the Great Tribulation, and they came into the household of Yahweh, their Elohim, and the Aleph Tav, the king, now holds them in his arms. Isn't that a beautiful picture? That just blew my mind this morning when I discovered that. Now I'm going to just leave you with those few thoughts. I don't want to disclose the rest. There's a few more thoughts. I looked at the Gematria of Kitavo. I also looked at the Gematria of 12. And number 12 are the 12 curses that's been revealed. And we're going to talk about those tomorrow. So I hope you have a lovely day, and I hope you are blessed. And just remember, our commander, our Aleph Tav, has got the Zion, and he's fighting the battles on our behalf in the spiritual, and his people will overcome. I'll leave you with those thoughts. Be blessed. Shalom.